Hello and welcome to Dawn Chorus Writes, a Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction and audio fiction. This is written by Jheqia, but narrated by myself, Dawn. Hello. And it's part of Fusion November. So this is part 2 to The Sunshine in My Smiles, called The Stars in Her Eyes. All of Jheqia's details for all the other writings is down below in the description, so make sure you go and give her some love and read some of her other fanfics. Also, a massive shout out to Zism for use of her beautiful artwork in the thumbnail, and all of her details are down below in the description. And make sure you send me some love by smashing that like button, comment down below, put stars in her eyes if you don't know what else to say, and subscribe because there's just so many videos coming out and stories and you don't want to miss out. So I hope you enjoy. The Stars in Her Eyes, Adrien's POV. She's doing that thing with a pencil again, Adrien thought. He was sitting with Nino and Alia and Marinette for lunch in the cafeteria. Or at least at the same table. Marinette was sitting across from Nino at the end. She had been drawing madly in her sketch pad, but it seemed that inspiration had abandoned her. Now she was staring off into the space between him and Nino, tapping her eraser against her lips. The movement drew his eyes to her mouth and the absent-minded smile she wore there. She has a beautiful smile. He had been watching her more closely over the last few days, ever since she had found him as Cat Noir on a balcony in the middle of the snowy night. Even now, Adrien didn't know what had led him there, but she had brought warmth and comfort to him when he needed it most. Whether it was the tea and cookies, the fact that she had given him a Christmas gift she had made with her own hands, or that she had openly shared her own concerns in a way that let him know he was not alone. Marinette had been his anchor when the storm of loneliness and expectations had swept over him. And she said that she was lonely too, he thought, as he watched her turn a new page and begin yet another drawing. She said she missed my smile, that she thought my laughter was one of her favorite sounds in the world. Even the memory still made his cheeks warm, and he rubbed his face in a poor attempt to hide it. Dude! A brown hand waved in front of his eyes, and Adrien startled in surprise. What? Sorry? He asked, only then aware that Nino had asked him something several times. Where were you, bro? His friend asked. Did you fall asleep again? No, just kind of spaced out a bit, Adrien replied. It's been a busy few weeks. It's nice to have some downtime with you guys, even if it's just over lunch break. You and Marinette both? Alia said, nudging her friend to the side. Are you sure you guys haven't been hanging out together late at night? You both seem tired at the same time. Alia, Marinette exclaimed, her pencil flying out of her hand and rolling under the table. Her wide, fearful eyes flickered from her best friend to his face and back again. You know, I have been busy working on Christmas presents. She blushed furiously when he handed her pencil back to her. Besides, she murmured, not looking at him, I'm sure you have more important things to do than to hang out with me. Adrien hated to see that sad look on her face. She had noticed that he was hiding behind his model mask more of late. She had said she had seen how tired and lost I felt in my eyes. Who else can do that? He got up from the table, walked around to her side, and knelt next to her. I couldn't think of anything I would like better, actually, he said, covering her hand with his. He glanced down at the page underneath their hands, and his eyes widened. It was a design for a jacket based on Cat Noir's aesthetics. With an awed smile, he tapped a sketch pad. May I? Sure, she stammered, handing it over shyly. It was true that the image was just a rough sketch, but her attention to detail was incredible. A high-angled collar swept down to tapered sleeves that came to a point across the top of the hands, with the black-on-black patches at the shoulders and elbows. The bottom of the jacket angled down in the back just below the hip to hint at a tail without getting in the way. A smaller drawing of a detachable hood angled up to the points to suggest ears. She even included a round zipper pull to mimic his bell. Eyes wide, he stared at her. Marinette, this is perfect. The details are amazing. She blushed and shot him a sweet smile as he held it up to others to see. It's just a rough sketch, she murmured. Don't be so modest, girl, Alia scoffed. Adrien has been in the fashion his whole life and he knows what's what. He knows an excellent design when he sees it. Don't you, sunshine? Well, I know this is something my father would be interested in, he said, rubbing his neck in embarrassment. Why does Alia insist on using silly nicknames for him? He could never understand, especially since she never did it to anyone else. Well, I can't really complain, he thought. I do it to Ladybug all the time, but at least Sunshine is better than Buttercup. Marinette looked at him, her eyes wide with astonishment. You really think so? Yeah, he replied, turning his attention back to her. I know he's mentioned doing a hero theme line next year. If you like, you can clean it up a bit and I can take him a copy. See what he thinks. Oh, Adrien! Thank you! She leapt off the bench and threw her arms around his neck. Thank you, thank you, thank you! He blushed fiercely, but returned a hug. Adrien knew Marinette was kind, caring girl, but for her to just embrace him like this, it was a revelation. She felt so warm and cuddly in her pink sweater. Her hair that brushed against his face was silky and smelled of lavender and almond cookies. She had never hugged him before. Not as Adrien anyway, and now she had. He suddenly realized the lack. Do you ever feel lonely for a specific person? Her words from the other night echoed through his mind and his heart started fluttering oddly in his chest. He would have gone on holding her for as long as she let him until he caught Alia and Nino exchanging smug looks across the table. Cheeks still burning, he pulled away and put his hands on her shoulder instead of around her waist. I mean, I can't promise anything, of course, but he liked your hat and he is difficult to impress. Worst case scenario, he might offer you some pointers to improve it. Standing that close to her, he saw the prettiest blush tint her cheeks, like roses on porcelain, and her eyes were shining. Had they always been that blue? He had thought they were grey. That fluttering became a pleasant squirming in his chest, and if she hadn't taken a step back just then, he didn't know what he would have done. Oh, of course, she said, her voice soft with gratitude. I understand, and I can have it ready by tomorrow if that would be okay. She had tucked her head down and was glancing up at him through her lashes. So cute. Yeah, sure. You deserve it, Marinette. Just then the bell rang, signalling the end of lunch period. Alia, a broad grin splitting her face, grabbed Marinette's hand and pulled her away quickly with barely a backwards wave. Marinette shot him a smile and a shrug as she whipped around the corner by her best friend. Dude, you sure have a way with the ladies. He looked at Nino, confused. What now? His best friend shook his head in admiration. I wish I could make my girl that happy. My Alia, though, I would have to have an exclusive with Ladybug or Cat Noir. Adrien blushed to the roots of his hair. Come on, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck in embarrassment. Marinette isn't my girlfriend. His friend raised an eyebrow at him, placed a confident hand on his shoulder. You should have seen your face when she hugged you. I've never seen you smile like that. I told you, she's just a friend. Whoa, you're still blushing. Try saying that with a straight face and I might believe you. Nino shook his head smugly and scooped up the trays to take them back to the window. Adrien grabbed his bag and ran to catch up with him. Marinette is not my girlfriend, Nino, he muttered again. Sure, Nino replied, shooting him a shy look from under the bill of his cap. Not yet. Adrien sat at the dinner table the next evening for his bi-weekly dinner with his father. It was never a fun experience, but it was the only regular time he could count on seeing him. There was never much conversation between the two aggressors, unless Adrien hadn't met his expectations, but tonight he was going to speak up. Marinette was worth it, no matter how nervous he was. Her hug, her smile, the way her eyes sparkled like stars. No, snap out of it, Adrien. He warned himself. Stay focused. He cleared his throat to draw his father's attention from the far end of the imposing empty dining table. Father, may I speak to you about something? He asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite the churning in his stomach. Gable Agreste lowered his tablet just enough for Adrien to see his eyes. Of course, he replied. We still have 7 minutes of time scheduled for this meal. I wanted you to look at something. Nervously, he bent to pull the black folder out of his bag, handing it to Natalie to pass to his father. Gabriel put down his tablet and flipped open the simple folder. Adrien thought he saw the silver eyebrows lift ever so slightly. A good sign. My friend Marinette designed it. When I saw it, I remembered you have that hero theme line you are working on, and I knew you should see it. Indeed, his father murmured, eyes scanning the design. Adrien knew there was nothing he could find wrong with it. Marinette had done an excellent job, but he wouldn't put it past his father to try. Marinette? That name is familiar. Isn't that Miss Dupan Chang? Yes, father. She won the competition you hosted at school for the best derby hat. You had me wear it at the fashion show last year. Yes. She was also the one who insisted you should be allowed to go with your friends to New York, wasn't she? It was not a question. Yes, sir. Marinette is very talented, and I thought you would like to see her work since you are designing some things along the same line. So I see. He closed the folder, handing it to Natalie. You talk about her often, and she has definitely taken an interest in you. His father looked squarely at him over steepled fingers, the first intentional eye contact they had shared in over a month. I should not have to warn you about being careful regarding young infatuations, but as such things go, you could have chosen worse. She is talented, ambitious, and studious, but honest and hard-working from what you have said. This last was said more to himself than to Adrien, but he could still feel the heat rising from his neck to his ears. Yes, on the whole, I approve. Gabriel wiped his mouth a final time and stood. Natalie, please arrange a one-time freelance contract for Miss Dupan Chang for this design, and 2 others to be included in next year's line upon my approval, to be submitted by late January. Yes, sir. The usual rate? Of course. Adrien was shocked. This was the first time he could remember his father doing anything for someone else. Unable to restrain himself, he jumped from his chair, rushed to his father, and gave him a hug. Thank you, father. Marinette won't let you down, I promise. Without changing his stance or giving the reprimand Adrien had expected for his lack of decorum, his father paused for a moment before wrapping one arm around his shoulder. This was all he wanted, for his father to spend time with him, to show him he loved him. For this moment, Adrien's heart was full, And in a roundabout way, he had Marinette to thank for it yet again. Then Gabriel cleared his throat and stepped away. He walked to the door of the dining room, but paused before leaving. He turned to look at Adrien, his mouth twitching in an unused smile. "Miss Dupang Chang might just be good for you," he said, and then was gone. Adrien stared after him, his cheeks warm with his father's approval. He still didn't believe it. He hadn't expected more than a curiosity look and written a few notes in the margins for how she could improve the design. This was far beyond anything he could have imagined. A freelance contract for 3 designs? For a 15-year-old unknown? He had known Marinette was talented, but this? Adrien was over the moon. He couldn't wait until tomorrow to tell her. He ran through the halls to Natalie's office and knocked quickly. "Come." He entered, his smile struggling to contain itself and failing. "Natalie, is there any chance you could get Marinette's contract finished tonight? I would love to take it to her this evening and share the good news. I'm all caught up on my homework, Chinese and piano." He knew he was pleading, but he couldn't help it. For an instant he thought she would refuse, but her expression softened ever so slightly. "Go and get ready. I will summon the car. The contract will be ready when you come down." "Thanks, Natalie." He ran up the stairs to grab his coat, scarf, gloves, and some cheese for Plag. "You did it, kid," his Kwame said as Adrien dashed about his room in a happy blur. "I thought for sure your dad would break before he bent. He must really like Bakery Girl." "Well, she's really talented and he can recognize that." "Uh-huh," Plag crooned with a knowing smirk. "And him approving of Marinette for other reasons has nothing to do with that goofy grin on your face." The Kwame hovered before him, putting on a dour expression that made him look constipated. "I should not have to warn you about being careful regarding young infatuations, but as sure things go, you could have chosen worse. Yes, overall, I approve." The imitation was spot on, and a little eerie if Adrien was being honest, but his father's words suggested thoughts that had been growing in his mind ever since Marinette had mentioned missing his smiles. She was sweet, kind, thoughtful, and generous. She hadn't expected his offer to show her designs to his father, nor had she ever asked for such a special treatment. The hug she had given him was surprise mixed with gratitude, but it had left him blushing and his stomach full of nervous butterflies. Kat had called Marinette Princess as a joke, but "she has the heart of a princess," he whispered, fingering the black scarf she had made for him before grabbing the blue one his father had got him for his last birthday. "And your father approves," Plag leered. "What better recommendation is there aside from mine?" Adrien glared at him. "Marinette needs nothing to recommend her, and I don't think someone who has already had 1,000 years affair with a dairy product has anything to say on the matter." His little friend snorted and scarfed down another wedge of camembert. "You realize this is the first time you haven't called Marinette just a friend, right?" Adrien levelled a finger at his Kwame. "Cut it out, or I'll cancel your next cheese order." "You like her. Admit it, kid." "Be quiet, you floating cheese gremlin." He grabbed Plag and stuffed him inside his shirt pocket before zipping up and heading downstairs. Natalie stood at the door, holding a folder out to him. "Your father says you may invite Miss Dupang Chang to your recital and Christmas Eve performance if you like." "Thanks again, Natalie." Even though it was only a few blocks away to the bakery and Marinette's family's apartment, it seemed to take forever. He practically flew up the stairs and knocked on the door. Marinette's mother opened it and a surprised look on her face. "Adrien, what a surprise," she said. "Are you here for Marinette?" "Yes, Miss Dupang Chang. Is she here?" He was bouncing up and down, unable to stand still in his excitement. "Of course." Sabrine gestured for him to step inside. "She's in her room. Go up, dear. I'll bring you a snack in a minute." But he didn't hear her as he took the stairs to the attic 2 at a time. He knocked on the trapdoor. "Come in, Mama," a sweet voice called. He burst through the hatch, startling Marinette at her desk. "Hey, Adrien! What are you doing here?" She clearly had been knitting something, and project needles and yarn flew from her hands as she tried to leap to her feet. She tripped over the leg of her chair, but he swept her up in a hug before she could fall. He swung around in happy circles, barely taking in the nervous squeal sounds she was making instead of words. "Marinette!" he cried, finally setting her down. A whole rose garden blossomed across her cheeks, but a confused smile softened her embarrassed look. His own smile was so wide it hurt as he handed the folder to her. "Here, this is for you." She took the folder from him. She looked between his face and the folder several times, the confusion growing. "Go ahead, open it." He couldn't wait to see her face. Tentatively, she flipped it open. She took in the business jargon and legal terms, but when her eyes landed on the fact that she would submit her design for inclusion in the new line, she dropped the folder. Her hands flew to cover her mouth. "You did this?" she whispered, her eyes sparkling like the first night on Earth. "You did this for me?" He shook his head, grabbing her shoulders. "All I did was show your design to my father. You were the one who did this, Marinette." "But I..." "No but. Your designs are amazing. You're amazing, Marinette. Even my father was impressed. I'm so proud of you." Her smile filled her up and shone out of her eyes. Is that what she meant about the sunshine in my smile? He wondered, transfixed by her gaze. She wrapped him in a hug, and he could feel her shaking in his arms. "Thank you, Adrien," she whispered, her breath tickling his ears. "This is the best gift anyone has ever given me." He blushed at her closeness and praise. She was warm and soft in his embrace, and the vague scent of vanilla and almond cookies teased his nose. This must be what home feels like, he thought, standing in a warm, cozy room as pink as her cheeks, filled with the scent of gingerbread and apple cider candle, the velvety feel of a Chanel jumper under her hands, and Marinette. Where his father's house was imposing, cold and sterile, everything about her was soft, warm and cozy. Yes, this is what home feels like. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. She pulled away slightly to look up at him. "What did I do?" "You brought me and my father closer today. It was the first time he had really talked to me in ages, and he gave me a hug. All because of you." "But I did nothing." She bit her lip in confusion at his words, but he didn't pull away further. "I wish I had, but..." "You have always been there for me, Marinette. You fight for everyone. You fought for me with my father. You were worth it, and knowing it was for you gave me the courage to speak to him. He likes you and approves of your design, so this is all you." They stood in a warm silence for a moment longer, wrapped in each other's arms before the sound of the trapdoor opening startled them both. Marinette jumped out of his arms, but her yarn had wrapped her feet when she spun around. Down she went, taking him with her in a tangle of limbs and snail-brown yarn. Adrien looked into her mother's face, sticking out of the trapdoor. She took in the situation with a suppressed laugh and set a plate of cookies down on the floor beside him before shooting him a wink as the hatch closed once more. Marinette looked at him, her face a dozen shades of pink, and her hands frantically trying to untangle the mess they had got themselves into. Adrien couldn't help it. The laughter bubbled out of him like sparkling water, and she joined him. He stopped suddenly, arrested by the giggles that pealed like fairy bells around the room. Her starry eyes were smiling, and her laughter was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. I hope it isn't ruined, he said, shifting to a sitting position as not to tangle them further while she worked. No, it'll be fine as soon as I get out of this. What's it gonna be when it's finished? A scarf for Nino? She replied with her delicate fingers unwrapping the yarn from around his shoes. He said he wanted one, and since his coat is red, I thought brown would look nice. I think anything you make is nice, he said, enjoying the way her eyes kept flickering to his face and how she bit her lower lip nervously. Adrien? Yes, Marinette? I wanted to ask you this afternoon, but you had Chinese class, and you don't have to come if you don't want to, or have something more important to do. Marinette, you're important too. What are you trying to ask me? She blushed again. He was storing them up in his memories like treasures, the way the lily and the rose waged a gentle war across her face. Well, my parents said I could have a small Christmas party on Saturday. Nothing fancy, just Ali and Nino and me and you, if you can come, that is. That sounds amazing, Marinette. The only holidays parties I've been to have been stuffy business ones. What will we do? She sat back on her heels now as they were free of the yarn. Well, there will be Christmas music and we'll play video games, maybe watch White Christmas, and we can exchange gifts and decorate ginger cookies. I would love to come. He quickly typed a message to Natalie asking for permission, but considering his father's approval of Marinette, he doubted it would be an issue. Great! There was that starry-eyed smile again. Oh, it filled him up more every time he saw it. Could I ask a favor, though? Sure, anything. He couldn't help the warm blush that prickled the back of his neck at her words, and his inner cat reared his head. Careful, he said, swiveling onto his knees so he could lean closer to her. I could ask for anything. Anything could be dangerous. Marinette quirked an eyebrow at him, while the rose hue of her cheeks darkened somewhat. She pursed her lips in a smirk he had never seen there before. She shook her head. Not from you. You would never do anything to harm anyone. Her eyes went wide, and she covered her mouth with her hand, as if afraid she said too much. Adrien smiled. If only she knew. He thought, running his thumb over his miraculous and hoping she didn't hear the quiet snort from Plag in his pocket. He leaned in, hiding his mouth behind his hand, as if about to share a secret. Could we make a gingerbread house? Please? He brought his hands together in a pleading gesture. I've never done one before. She looked down at the floor, and the smirk softened into a look so tender it made his insides melt. Anything to make you smile, she whispered. He swallowed hard and opened his mouth to say he knew not what when his phone buzzed with a new message. Both grateful and annoyed by the distraction, he glanced down at it. Natalie said I have father's permission to come, he said as a second buzz sounded, and it's time for me to go. Sorry, I wish... He wished he could stay longer. He wished she would throw her arms around him again. He wished he had the nerve to lean in and kiss her. But no, he had to go. But maybe on Saturday? He rose to his feet and offered her his hand to help her up. Oh, the cookies! Swiftly, she pulled a small drawstring bag from the pile of ornaments on her desk and filled it for him. Here, she said, holding it out to him as he took them from her, one of his wishes come true. She threw her arms around his neck, wrapping him one last time in the warmth and sweetness. Thank you again, Adrien, for everything. She whispered. "Anything for you, Marinette," he replied. She giggled as she let him go. "I thought you said offering anything could be dangerous." He stepped towards the trapdoor, lifted it before taking one last look at her. "You would be worth anything, Marinette." His first real Christmas party was better than Adrien could have ever. His first real Christmas party was better than Adrien could have imagined. Marinette and her parents had made a gingerbread castle for them to decorate, complete with all the candies and icing to decorate it with. But Nino and Alia got bored halfway through and started a pillow fight with the sofa cushions, leaving Marinette defending him while he struggled to finish the towers. She won the first 3 rounds of video games, but then graciously bowed out. "To let the rest of you have a chance," she said loftily, only to be pelted with popcorn. They danced their Christmas carols, Nino and Alia breaking out of their best dance moves while trying not to fall down laughing at them trying to do the same. They watched White Christmas, and Adrien was thrilled when Marinette sighed during the song, counting your blessings, and let her head rest against his shoulder. Afterwards, they tidied up the mess they had made and exchanged gifts. Nino raved about the new headphones Alia had got him, as well as the record case Adrien had got for his DJ kit, though a gentle hug was saved for Marinette for the scarf. Alia was squealing like a 5-year-old over all the Ladybug items she'd gotten. Adrien himself was happy with the framed collage of their friends Alia had made for him and the compilation of mixed tracks that Nino had promised him. His cup of happiness was full, but opening Marinette's gift caused it to overflow. Inside the gift bag was a sweater in a sapphire blue with a V-neck collar lined in a silvery grey to match the thin bands around the cuffs. He knew it was cashmere from the feel, making it both lightweight and warm. He went to the bathroom and changed into it right then. It was soft and smelled like lavender and cookies. It smelled of Marinette. As he straightened the cuffs, he noticed a slightly thicker patch on the inside of each wrist. Turning one hand up to look, he saw a small heart knitted there, designed to cover the pulse point. A warm, giddy rush swept over him. Marinette had always jumbled her words, so she found her own way to express her feelings for him. The knowledge of those little hearts and what they meant crystallized his intent. He sent a brief message to Alia. "Hey, could you guys give me and Marinette a few minutes alone? I want to give her a present in private." Alia. "Really?" He could almost hear her knowing tone. Alia. "Sure thing, sunshine. We should head out anyway." "Thanks." He sighed in relief, but then another message came in. Alia. "Just don't do anything I wouldn't do." Adrien blushed furiously and struggled to cool it as he pocketed his phone. He returned to the living room to Marinette's worried smile and whistles of appreciation from Nino and Alia. He struck a pose and they laughed. "Dude, I know you're a model and would look good in a paper bag, but Marinette did right by you. You look awesome." "Yeah, she did," he said, smiling at her. You really like it?" she asked shyly. She fidgeted over him for a minute, twitching the sweater here and there, checking the fit. How could she possibly be worried that he wouldn't like something that she had made with him with so much thought and care and love? Adrien took her hands in his to still them. "Marinette, it's perfect. Thank you." He gently tapped the inside of her wrist over the pulse point. "I love it." She blushed, biting her lip. Oh, how can she be this cute? Could I really be this lucky? "Well, guys, this has been fun and all, but Nino and I need a jet. Marinette, we have left our presents for you under the tree. See you later, girl." "Ali, what?" The young reporter threw her a wink. "Trust me, you'll thank me later." She dragged Nino to the door and there was a brief scramble for coats. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you alone for a minute, Marinette." Adrien said, rubbing his neck nervously. She looked at him with a shy smile. Of course, she stammered. He went to the Christmas tree and picked up a small blue box tied with a silver bow. I know it isn't much, but when I saw it, I knew I had to get it for you. He held it out to her with a soft smile. She blushed and took the box with shaking hands. She took the ribbon into her pocket and tore open the paper. Her delicate fingers lifted out the enamel pendant on a fine silver chain, and a golden-hearted lily whose petals blended from white near the center to pale pink near the tips. Her eyes flickered from his face to the pendant and back again. Adrien, she breathed. It's beautiful. May I? He asked, holding out his hands. She handed the pendant to him, and he leaned forward, breathing in her sweetness as he fastened the chain around her neck. It reminded me of you. He briefly rested 2 fingers on the lily that lay in the hollow of her throat before looking into her eyes. The Christmas lights gave her a golden glow, and the stars in her ocean gaze were shining brighter than ever. His mouth went dry, but the words spilled from his heart regardless. Silver for your eyes, yellow for your heart of gold, and pink. His hands moved of its own accord to cup her cheek, brushing the roses that bloomed in her sweet face with his thumb. Pink for the blushes, I hope. Will only. He couldn't finish, his heart too full for words, but this was Marinette, and she knew. Adrien could see it in her smile. He leaned in, hesitant at first and then more boldly, when she closed the distance between them. A shock ran through him when their lips met his, soft and warm, tasting of Christmas spices and sugar. Her hand crept around his neck to tangle in his hair while he found her waist and pulled her closer. The thunder that reverberated through him was echoed in the pounding of their hearts pressed against each other, and he couldn't tell where his heart stopped and hers began. This was it. This was what love was supposed to feel like, as warm as a sweater and as spicy, as sweet as gingerbread. Adrien knew it in that moment that this was what he had been searching for so long, and now he had found it. He had found her, and he would never be alone again. A bright flash and the telltale sound of a phone camera going off startled them both. Marinette squeaked and jumped a little, but didn't leave the circle of his arms. They both glanced over to see Nino and Alia in the doorway. Nino shot them a broad wink, his smile looking fit to crack his face. Alia's phone was out, of course, but a sprig of mistletoe dangling from one finger? I guess you guys didn't need our help after all, she crowed with a smirk. Alia! Marinette shrieked, her face turning scarlet despite the wide smile still on her lips. Just preserving the moment, girl. Then turning around, she and Nino fled through the open door and down the stairs, hollering behind her, You'll thank me later! Adrien was blushing too now, but pulled her back against him. I guess we can't blame them, he said, a laugh bubbling out of him. She laughed with him, her fairy-like giggle the perfect accompaniment to the tingling in his chest. He kissed her laughing lips and grinned when he felt her lips part in a smile. He pulled away slowly with a sigh, pressing his forehead against hers. I should go too. I know, she whispered. I'm just worried that I'll wake in the morning and find this was a dream. He pressed a kiss on her hair and tucked her head under his chin. This felt right, like she was made for him. I know what you mean. Let's dream of each other. He felt her sigh in contentment. It wouldn't be the first time I've dreamt of your smile. Her words lit sparklers in his chest. Can the prince return to his princess tower tomorrow? With a muffled gasp, Marinette leant back and looked at him with wide eyes. He mentally winced at the use of Kat's nickname for her, but it was too late now. Attentively, her fingers brushed the hair off his forehead in a gentle caress, tracing where his mask would have been. Is it really you? She whispered. He sighed, pressing her hand against his cheek and leaning into her touch with eyes closed. His heart pounded and his stomach churned. Would she reject him too? Does it matter, princess? For the span of 2 heartbeats, she was silent, and Adrien thought his heart would break. Then her arms were around him once more, her lips soft and sweet against his. Her acceptance lit a fire inside his heart, so big he thought its light must radiate out through his skin. He never wanted to let her go. They finally parted, breathless and giddy over each other. Adrien took her hands in his and kissed them both. He gathered up his things and they shared one last lingering kiss before he left. As the car pulled away, he glimpsed Marinette on her balcony waving after him. He blew her an unseen kiss through the tinted windows, knowing he would spend the night dreaming of the stars in her eyes. The Kwame hovered before him, putting on a door expression that made him look constipated. I should not have to warn you about being careful regarding young infant. I should not have to warn you about being careful regarding young infatuations. But as sure things go, you could have chosen worse. Yes, all over, I approve. I definitely can't use that. A bright flash and a telltale sign. A bright flash and the telltale sound. Telltale. Seriously. A bright flash and the telltale sound. A bright flash and the telltale sound of a phone camera going off. Telltale sound. Try saying that 10 times fast. A bright flash and the telltale sound of a phone camera going off startled them both. Marinette squeaked and jumped a little, but didn't leave the circle of his arms. Thank you for listening. Oh, the feels. Make sure you give a massive shout out and love to Jheqia for writing such a beautiful story. Make sure you give me some love and like by liking this video, commenting down below what you think of it, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future ones, because you guys have voted and you decided that every Wednesday starting from December, Jheqia's gonna have her own story and I will be reading it. And yeah, so Wednesday is gonna be Jheqia's day starting from Wednesday the 1st of December, so make sure you look out for that. That's this Wednesday coming, and yeah, make sure you don't miss out. And thank you very much for listening. Bye.